Hey everybody, this is Jeff Livingston with Cognitive Path, and I'm with...
Yeah, Henry Pezzo, Omiliav. Pleasure to be here, Jeff.
It's a pleasure. Now, I understand you're from Philly, huh?
I am from Philly, yeah.
How does it feel to be in D.C., where you're only rival for the NFC East this year?
Put it this way, I'm happy to be here. I'm still hoping that, the Commanders don't actually take any more points from us.
Very cool. I'm glad you're here. Now, for those that are not familiar with Omiliav, do you want to tell us a little bit about the company?
Yeah, so we've been around since about 2008 in the AI space, so specifically focused around the conversational ambit of AI, right? How does AI speak to human beings? How do we create an immersive experience? We've grown really rapidly over the last couple of years, specifically for our North America group, expanding into government, really expanding into retail and various other verticals. So really from an Omiliav standpoint, our goal is to provide the most human-like, human-to-machine conversation experience possible.
Oh, that's really interesting, particularly because I think one of the things we're seeing right now is the need to keep humanity involved, right? We've seen the initial customer service missteps, if you would, with the LLMs and how they've kind of not necessarily been the ideal next step. But before we get into that, I did want to ask you about foundational technology, because when we were chatting, you had mentioned that you guys kind of serve as the basis for a lot of brands. And how is it that you're fitting in that larger tech stack for AI and the customer service conversation?
So great question. So kind of thinking in terms of tech stack, there's something that our CEO said that I always hold true. Even when we think in context of like an electric engine, right? It's a great piece of technology, but when you actually apply like an electric engine to something like a car, that's when you start talking in terms of solution, right? So we've been around a while as far as AI development, from NLU driven all the way to now generative, large language models and all that. These are great pieces of technology, but depending on which vertical you're servicing, voice biometrics is an example, right. Very applicable right now across commercial, but when you're thinking government, something that's still being explored, you're always thinking in terms of solutioning, right? And the solution has to be something that fits a use case. The technology is great, but the way you apply it changes based on what the solution looks like.
Sure, and that made sense to me. A lot of your website talks about being able to customize off-the-shelf products towards each different sector. Can you talk about how you've kind of made this an easy, low-code, no-code approach?
Yep, so step one, we actually own our whole technology stack. So from the ears, the automated speech recognition, the brain, down to every little component, like that is an Omiliav built solution. That means that when we're actually thinking about, do we want to change the voice? Is there a specific persona brand that we want? Are there specific ways in which we want information displayed? Do we want to make sure that the existing authentication process stays in place? It's all very easy to configure. With our jump to cloud, that's been a big part of it, was the idea that we want to make sure business users are able to use the platform, so you don't require an army of IT people to make the day-to-day changes. But you still have that granularity, right, of identifying specific values, what we call mini apps, to go down and actually drive business value overall, right? I want this value to be 16 digits. I need it to be at a 97% accuracy because this is your policy number. And if I don't have this, we can't move forward.
Oh, wow, pretty awesome. So it sounds like you guys have been entrenched and experienced. I can tell this already. Just that 97% accuracy number is something that, people don't think about with AI, but if you consider hallucinations and the problems that they've caused, clearly that's a big number.
Yeah, and in terms of generative, right, like when we think of generative, we've always been what I call cautiously intrepid when we think about innovation. For us, there's two ways in which we leverage generative. Way number one, generative is really how we as people want AI to speak to us. We want a little bit of that flair of creativity. We want a little bit of that engagement. But when we think about generative through a business process, like when I'm paying off my card, right, that's not where I want creativity. The other part is when you think about back-end development. A lot of organizations we work with are making this jump towards AI, and the expertise required to develop an AI solution is something that they want to build towards. That's a great place to leverage generative. Can I make it easier to understand questions my customers could ask? Can I make it easier to pull in API and dissect which information the AI will need? So that's a big part of where we are leveraging generative as well.
Outstanding. I like that cautious approach. It really makes sense, moving forward, but in a wise way. Let's transition a little bit to government. Obviously, we have a huge government crowd here. You guys are FedRAMP compliant. you get the security game, and it's really important, obviously, for federal and taxpayer security, or Intel and the larger defense community is definitely security-minded for obvious reasons. Talk to me a little bit about how you approach security for government AI.
So, unfortunately, because my laptop sometimes is so hard to get into, but I will say one thing. As Omilia, we've always taken security by design by security. And what I mean is everything we've done and verticals that we've worked to, including government, we've always understood the need of compliance. We've always understood the need to secure data and to make sure that the only data that we have available is the data that each of our, whether it's government customers or other customers, allow us to have, right? For government specifically, I think security goes to the next level too, right? You're not just talking PII, now you're talking about access to documentation, you're talking about how do you leverage that documentation in ethical ways that allows for a service to be provided. Like, I think you brought up tax payment, right? I want to know the status of, did you receive my payment? Did you do this? But at the same time, I also want to know that that data is being used for a point-specific action, right? That it's not being necessarily digested throughout an LLM model and being somehow found elsewhere. Right,
that's the worst case scenario, of course. And you and I were talking a little bit about voice, and the interview beforehand, they were talking about voice and deepfakes. Obviously, you guys authenticate for voice with the commercial sector, but that may not work so well with the federal sector. Can we delineate why it works in one but not the other?
Yeah, so I think like any voice, we offer voice biometrics, right? We offer voice biometrics as an authentication methodology, optional opt-in, right? Understanding what's implicit versus explicit consent. I think when we think in terms of voice biometrics, one of the big things is to realize that across the United States, at a state level, each state has different regulation to what's considered to be, to gather consent. Where we've seen a big adoption inside of more of the commercial sectors, right? For government, there's other considerations that need to go in because from a constituent standpoint, right, I need to understand both my state legislator, but also the policies that I have within my departments. It is something that I do believe will be adopted. Realistically, we all use biometrics in our day-to-day. When I walk through TSA, they definitely take my picture.
Sure.
I think it's just something, again, government tends to be more cautious, and that does align well to how we think about it as well.
Right, because there's a lot of fears about privacy, et cetera. But anybody that's been through the two-factor authentication nightmare knows that it'd be a lot easier to just put their finger down or have that kind of voice authentication.
And that's the thing, like you can secure a system 100%. You just make it impossible for anyone to access it, right? So
right.
Any conversation around security is always a balancing of ease of use and the level of security you want on something.
I have to say, I really like the way Google, and I will portray myself, I am an Apple user, but I do like the way Google Chrome and Apple work together with the fingerprint. It makes things a lot easier, and I feel totally okay. I don't see anybody chopping off my finger anytime soon. I feel good about it, really good. I know you guys do a lot of work with state and local. Tell me a little bit about some of the nuances that you're seeing on that smaller government front, if you would.
I think a lot of times it's operationalizing those actions that are kind of taken for granted or the actions that take a lot of time and we just know it's low-hanging fruit items. Think like I have a court mandate, I have a ticket to pay, right? There's business logic around that. You actually can't set your court date until you've paid the ticket, right?
Right.
So how do we make it easy? We provide that information, we facilitate the payment, we set up that appointment. Turns out, even when you think as a constituent, your use cases between commercial and government aren't necessarily different. It's just the flavors of how you present the information and the business logic you have to account for.
Right, makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Okay, well, I do a little softball question on the way out. And my question for you is, what is the one app that you think everybody here and everybody online should know about?
From our side?
From your side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we presented on this earlier, so I'll say it. I think the ambits we're taking right now in our drive-through scenarios with Taco Bell, probably you should try it out.
Pretty cool. All right, that's right. You guys do drive-throughs. How'd you end up doing drive-through AI? That's really cool.
Honestly, because we have control of our tech stack, we have the ability to. A lot of people here talk about how you can tune AI.
Right.
But a large part of how humans interact is voice. I mean, you and I are speaking to each other, right?
Sure.
So having control of actually tuning the ears, the automated speech recognition, is a big part of it. that leads to drive-through, because in the drive-through scenario,
It's all voice,
you've got and you've got airplanes flying, you've got the kids screaming in the back, the person doesn't know what they want, the engine's roaring. There's a lot of factors that actually are limiting to a lot of organizations to actually have the use case that for us were intrinsic to how we see the growth of AI, which is it's great to have a powerful brain, but if you don't have the mouth, you don't have the ears, you don't have the other components that make us human, it's hard to actually have a solution. You have technology again.
Outstanding. So obviously Yum Brands is one of your customers.
Yeah, I think they spoke with us yesterday, so
Yeah.
I think I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, very cool, man. Well, congratulations. You guys are doing great work. Thanks for appearing here.
Thank you so much, Jeff.